Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into the world of security controls.
Ooh, exciting.
It's actually a lot more interesting than you might think at first.
Right.
We've got some excerpts here from a CompTIA Security Plus exam prep guide.
Okay.
And we're going to break down these concepts in a way that's both informative but also engaging. We'll try to keep it fun.
Right.
So
I like it.
how do we even start
Yeah.
with building this idea of a digital fortress? Where do security controls fit into that?
Well, I think it all begins with understanding the four main categories of security controls.
Okay.
And those are technical, managerial, operational, and physical.
Okay, so like a real building.
Right.
Wouldn't just have locks on the doors. You would have, security cameras. You'd have an alarm system.
Totally. Yeah.
You might have lights outside.
Yeah. You have like a layered approach.
Exactly, layered approach. So
Right.
what about, let's start with technical controls. What does that even mean?
So technical controls are the technological safeguards that we put in place to protect our systems and our data. So this could be anything from firewalls to intrusion detection systems to encryption.
So like firewalls and encryption, is that stuff that actually blocks the data?
It does, yeah.
Or like scrambles it so people can't read it?
Yeah, so firewalls are like our first line of defense.
Okay.
They're preventing any unauthorized access to our network.
Okay.
They work by basically creating a barrier between your network and the outside world.
Okay.
And they filter traffic based on rules that you set.
So it's like a bouncer at a club.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to have your ID, got to look the part, or you're not getting in.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And then encryption. So encryption is all about protecting the confidentiality of our data, right?
Right.
We're basically taking our data and we're scrambling it in such a way that it's unreadable to anyone who doesn't have the key to unscramble it.
So even if they get it, they can't read it.
Exactly.
Okay, that's comforting.
Yeah.
Now, what about managerial controls?
All right, so managerial controls, these are more about the policies, the procedures, the best practices that we put in place to manage our overall security program.
So that would be like risk assessments and security audits, making sure that everything is up to par and everybody's following the rules. Yeah,
so a risk assessment is basically taking a look at your organization and trying to identify what are the potential threats and vulnerabilities that you face.
Okay.
And then figuring out, okay, what can we do to mitigate those risks?
So you're being proactive?
Exactly. It's all about being proactive.
Okay.
And then security audits, like you said, are about making sure that the controls that you've put in place are actually working.
Right. And everybody's following the rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Now, what about day-to-day stuff?
Right.
Is that operational controls?
That's operational, So operational controls are all about the day-to-day activities that we do to ensure that our security measures are working as intended.
So is that like incident response or security awareness training and stuff, like making sure everybody has the right access?
Yep. So incident response is about, what happens when something bad does happen. How do we respond to that?
So that's like a fire drill.
Yeah. Exactly. You have to have a plan in place so you can respond quickly and effectively.
Got it.
And security awareness training is so important.
Yeah.
It's about educating your users about the threats that are out there and how they can help to protect the organization.
Because anybody could be the one who notices something's wrong.
Exactly. Everyone has a role to play.
Now, we've talked about technical. We've talked about strategic planning.
Yeah.
We've talked about day-to-day. Is there anything else we need to consider when we're building our digital fortress?
There is one more.
Okay. We've covered the digital part, but what about the actual building?
Yeah, good point.
Where the data and the systems actually live, the tangible stuff. Is that physical controls?
Exactly. That's physical control. So that's anything that's physically protecting our assets.
So like locks on the doors, security cameras, big fences with barbed wire.
All of that, yeah.
Really?
So think about access control systems.
Okay.
Things like using key cards.
Okay.
Biometric scanners.
Oh, fancy.
Even security guards.
Wow. So it's like those movies where you have to go through all those checkpoints.
Yeah, exactly.
Multiple layers.
Multiple layers. You have to scan your hand. You got to show your ID.
Wow.
All of that.
So it's not just about keeping people out.
Right.
It's also about protecting the stuff from the elements.
Yeah, environmental controls.
Okay.
Are really important. So making sure that the temperature and humidity are controlled.
Right, because servers are very sensitive, I've heard.
Very sensitive. Yeah, you don't want them getting too hot or too cold.
Got it.
And then we also have things like fire suppression systems.
Right. In case of fire, you got to have those sprinklers.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got our 4 categories.
Right.
But it's not just about what we protect, it's how we protect it, right?
Absolutely. So that brings us to control types.
Okay.
So we've talked about the what, now we're talking about the how.
Yeah, give me the how.
So the control types define how those controls are actually implemented.
Okay.
And there are 6 main types.
6. Okay, I'm ready.
All right, so we've got preventative, deterrent, detective, corrective, compensating, and directive.
Whoa, that's a mouthful.
It is a lot, yeah.
Okay, so let's start with preventive.
Okay, preventive
What's that all about?
controls, just like the name suggests. They're
Yeah.
trying to prevent security incidents from happening in the first place.
So like that moat we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Like the moat
Okay.
keeps the invaders out.
And the big, strong wall.
Yes, the big strong wall.
Oh, okay, got it.
So a good example of a preventive control is a firewall.
Right, because that blocks stuff before it even gets to your network.
Exactly, it's that first line of defense.
Okay, what about deterrent controls?
So deterrent controls are all about discouraging attackers.
Okay.
So we're not necessarily preventing the attack,
Right.
but we're making it less appealing for the attacker.
So it's like those signs that say, beware of dog.
Yeah, exactly. Or smile, you're on camera.
Right. You might not have a dog, but they don't know that.
Exactly. It's all about perception.
Okay, I like it.
So another good example is security cameras.
Right.
You know, they might not actually stop a burglar,
Right.
but the fact that they know they're being watched might deter them.
It's like that saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Exactly.
Now, what happens if something does get through?
So if something does get through, that's where our detective controls come in.
Okay.
So detective controls are all about identifying and investigating security incidents.
So they're like the detectives.
Yes, they're like the detectives of the security world.
Got it.
So they're looking for clues.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out what happened,
Right.
how it happened, and who might be responsible.
So it's like an intrusion detection system. It's always watching.
Exactly. Intrusion detection systems or security information and event management systems.
Okay.
These are all examples of detective controls.
All right. So we've detected something. Now what?
So now we need to take action to fix the problem, and that's where corrective controls come in.
Okay.
So corrective controls are about fixing the vulnerabilities.
Right. So we patch that hole in the wall.
Exactly. Patch the hole in the wall.
Okay.
So a good example of a corrective control is having a data backup and restoration plan.
Okay. So if something happens, you can just restore from backup.
Exactly. You can get your systems back up and running quickly.
And you're not losing everything.
Exactly.
Got it. So now what about those times when we need like an extra layer of protection, like just in case?
Right. So that's where compensating controls come in.
Okay.
So compensating controls are basically our backup plan
Right.
when our primary controls fail.
So it's like that secret escape tunnel.
Exactly. A secret escape tunnel.
Okay.
So a good example of a compensating control is multi-factor authentication.
Right. So if somebody steals your password, they still can't get in.
Exactly. They need that second factor.
Like that code on your phone.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've got preventive, deterrent, detective, corrective, and compensating.
Right.
Is there one more?
There is one more, directive controls.
Directive.
So
Okay.
directive controls are all about providing instructions and guidelines
Okay.
to make sure that everyone is following proper security practices.
So it's like the rule book.
Exactly, the rule book of the castle.
You got to follow the rule.
You got to follow the rules.
Or
That's it.
else. Okay. So a company's security policy would be an example of that.
Yeah, a security policy is a great example.
Right. So we've got our 6 control types. Now, how do we decide which ones to use?
That's a good question.
Is there a formula?
There's no magic formula, unfortunately.
Oh, man.
It really depends on your specific needs and circumstances.
Okay, so it's not just about throwing everything at the problem.
No, you have to be strategic.
Right.
You have to assess your risks, understand your vulnerabilities, and then choose the controls that make the most sense.
So it's like a chess game.
Yeah, it's very strategic.
You've got to plan your moves.
Exactly.
All right, so can you give me some real-world examples
Absolutely.
of how these are used?
Let's start with phishing attacks.
Okay, phishing, yeah, those are common.
They're very common.
Those are those emails that try to trick you
Exactly.
into clicking on stuff.
Yeah, they're trying to get your personal information.
Yeah, and they look so real sometimes.
Yeah, they do. They're getting very sophisticated.
So how do we stop those?
So to stop phishing attacks, we can use a variety of controls.
Okay.
We can start with preventive controls. So things like email filtering.
Okay, yeah.
that can scan incoming emails for suspicious links or attachments.
Okay.
We can also use deterrent controls, like security awareness training.
Right, teaching people how to spot things.
Exactly, teaching people how to spot those phishing emails.
Okay.
And if a phishing attack does get through,
Yeah.
we can use detective controls,
Okay.
like intrusion detection systems,
Right.
to try to identify any unusual activity.
Got it.
And then corrective controls, like incident response procedures,
Okay.
to help us contain the damage and recover.
So it's a multi-layered approach.
It is, yeah.
Okay, now what about those scary insider threats?
All right, insider threats, those are a different beast altogether.
Yeah, because it's somebody you trust.
Exactly. It's somebody who already has access
Right.
to your systems and data.
And they know the ins and outs.
They do.
So how do you stop those?
So to prevent insider threats, we can use things like strong authentication protocols,
Okay.
access controls to limit who has access to what information.
Okay.
We can use detective controls like user activity
So
monitoring.
you're watching what they're doing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then corrective controls.
Yeah.
Like incident response and disciplinary action.
So you got to have those consequences.
You do, yeah. You have to hold people accountable.
Okay, so it seems like the big takeaway here is that there's no one right answer.
Exactly.
It depends on the situation.
It does, yeah.
So it's about understanding the different types of controls,
Right.
assessing your risks, and coming up with the right plan.
Exactly. There's no magic formula.
Okay, so what about the human element?
Oh, the human element, that's a big one.
Because even with all these controls,
Yeah,
people can still mess things up.
absolutely. People are often the weakest link.
Yeah, you can have the best security system in the world,
Right.
but if somebody leaves the door open, what's the point?
Exactly. So security awareness training is crucial.
Okay.
We need to educate our users about the threats that are out there and how they can help to protect the organization.
Okay, so that brings us to an interesting question.
Okay.
If we have all this stuff in place, why do data breaches still happen?
That is the million-dollar question.
It is, because we hear about them all the time.
All the time.
It feels like every day there's a new company getting hacked.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that security is not a one-time fix.
Right.
It's an ongoing process.
Okay.
The threat landscape is constantly changing.
So we're always playing catch up.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
So we have to constantly be adapting and evolving our security controls.
Right. So you can't just set it and forget it.
Nope. Security is a journey, not a destination.
Got it. So even with all the best technology, people are still the weakest link
Absolutely.
because they can make mistakes.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they're even doing it on purpose.
Right. We have to be aware of insider threats as well.
So those are the people who are intentionally trying to cause harm.
Exactly. They might be motivated by financial gain or revenge or even just a desire to cause chaos.
So it's like a spy in a movie.
Yeah, it can feel like that sometimes.
So how do we stop that?
So to prevent insider threats, it's important to have strong security measures in place.
Okay.
Things like background checks.
Right. Make sure you're hiring the right people.
Exactly.
Right.
Access controls
Right.
to limit who has access to sensitive information,
Got it.
and then monitoring systems
Okay.
to detect any suspicious activity.
Okay. So we're watching them.
We are, yeah, but it's not about being Big Brother.
Right.
It's about protecting the organization.
Protecting everybody.
Exactly.
Okay. So what can our listeners do to protect themselves?
Well, first and foremost, be aware.
Okay.
Security is everyone's responsibility.
Right. It's not just the IT department's problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
So stay informed about the latest threats.
Yeah.
Be careful about what you click on.
Okay.
Use strong passwords
Uh-huh.
and report any suspicious activity.
Okay. Good advice.
And don't forget to keep your software up to date.
But those updates are important.
They are, yeah. They often contain security patches.
Right. So it seems like the main message here is
Yeah,
security is a journey, not a destination.
it is. You got it.
Okay. So we've talked about all these different types of security controls, but
Right?
how do we actually put this into practice? Like, where do we even begin?
Yeah, it can be overwhelming, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, where do you start with all of this?
Exactly.
So I think the first step is to conduct a risk assessment.
Okay. Risk assessment. And what does that entail?
So basically, you're identifying what your most valuable assets are
Okay.
and then analyzing the threats and vulnerabilities that could put those assets at risk.
So, like, what are the crown jewels of your organization, so to speak?
Exactly. Exactly.
And then figuring out where the weak points are.
Right. Where are those vulnerabilities? Where are the gaps in your defenses?
Got it.
And once you have a good understanding of that,
Yeah.
then you can start to develop a security strategy.
So that's where you figure out which controls to use.
Exactly. You're choosing the controls that are going to best mitigate those risks.
Okay, so it's all about being strategic.
It is. It's not just about throwing a bunch of controls at the problem and hoping for the best.
Right. It's got to be tailored to your specific needs.
Absolutely. Every organization is different.
Okay, so we've done our risk assessment, we've got our strategy, we've implemented our controls.
Right.
Are we good now?
Well, unfortunately not.
Ugh, come on.
I know.
What?
Security is not a one-time thing.
Right.
It's an ongoing process.
Okay.
The threat landscape is constantly changing.
So those attackers are always coming up with new tricks.
They are. They're always one step ahead.
So what do we do?
So we have to continuously monitor and improve our security posture.
Okay, so it's not enough to just build the fortress.
Right.
You got to have guards on the wall, 24/7.
Exactly. We need to be vigilant. We need to be proactive.
Always looking for those weak spots.
Exactly.
So that means staying informed about the latest threats.
Absolutely. You have to stay up to date on what's happening in the cybersecurity world.
So it's a lot of work.
It is, but it's essential.
All right, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've talked about the different categories and types of security controls.
Yeah.
We've discussed the importance of risk assessments, ongoing monitoring, and staying informed.
Right.
And I think the key takeaway here is that security is not just about technology.
Absolutely not.
It's about people.
It's about people. It's about processes. It's about culture.
So we all have a role to play.
We do, every single one of us.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure. It was great being here.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into security controls.
Stay safe out there.
Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant,